He stopped screaming on the third day. I thought that meant it was over. He looked up at me, calm. "It doesn't hurt anymore," he said, smiling.
Welcome, Initiate. Nurgle is called the Lord of Decay, the god of plague, rot, and death dressed in garden clothes. His followers are the damned, living inside a spreading wound, his realm. Under Nurgle, the body fails first, and shortly after, the soul. That's the Ministerum's version, but there is something they left out. In 10,000 years of holy war, planetary quarantine, and inquisitorial fire, not one campaign has ever truly defeated him permanently. The question this broadcast exists to answer is not how Nurgle spreads plague. It's why he doesn't need to. The sanctioned version tells us that Nurgle is one of the 4 ruinous powers, his domain being disease, decay, death, and the grotesque miracle of rebirth. He feeds on despair, but more importantly, on what comes after it, sending plagues that corrupt the body and snatch the soul, dragging it into his realm, the Garden of Nurgle, described as lush, teeming, alive with things that shouldn't be. His followers, across 10,000 years of documented history, are universally recorded as one thing: cheerful. Seems like his followers like to smoke some drugs. Sorry about that. The Ecclesiarchy explains this cheerfulness as the final stage of corruption. Nurgle has dismantled the part of the mind that registers suffering. But every rule has exceptions, and this cheerful state does not fully explain one of his greatest champions, Mortarion. Primarch of the Death Guard and son of the Emperor, he was born on a world where a sorcerer weaponized plague against the population, but he fought back with nothing but stubbornness and sheer biological refusal to break. He built his entire legion around that same idea, soldiers who could outlast anything through discipline and endurance alone. He hated chaos, weakness, and above all things, the idea that something external could defeat what internal will should hold. He should be the last person in the galaxy Nurgle should have claimed, but then the ruin storm took his fleet. For weeks, the Death Guard drifted in the warp, being hidden with plagues that were not so random. They were designed point by point, illness by illness, to defeat exactly the resistances Mortarion had spent centuries building. All his men were dying, not for a battle, but for this plagues, rotting them from the inside slowly. His sons who had followed him because they believed he would never let them fall. Mortarion called for help to the Emperor, but the only thing he found was silence. He tried again, but was met with only void. But there were an answer, only not for his father. Nurgle answered. The Inquisition will tell you Mortarion failed, that he was weak, broken, and made the wrong choice here. The only thing I ask you, Initiate, is to look at that story one more time. A man of iron conviction, centuries of resistance, and absolute dedication to his people. Broken not by temptation nor promise of power, but because in his worst moment, only one god showed up and the other didn't. Does that sound like weakness? Or does it sound like something the Inquisition cannot afford to write down? When a man of that caliber falls to Nurgle because of abandonment, you are not looking at a moral failure. You are looking at a structural one. But the Emperor is not the only one to blame here. The Imperium is doing it worse. Nurgle does not need to conquer in the way others do. He doesn't rely on schemes, brutal conquest, or temptation alone. Yes, he spreads plagues and wages war. But that's not where he wins. He only needs to wait. He waits until you have prayed long enough and received nothing. Until the machinery around you, the Ecclesiarchy, the Administratum, the grinding, indifferent weight of the Imperium of man, has made clear that your individual survival is not a priority, and the choice is no longer between the Emperor and chaos, is between continuing to suffer or not. When that happens, he opens a door. That is the mechanism. Most people who fall to him do so not in blindness or dragged screaming into darkness. They are stepping forward when there is nothing left behind them worth staying for. Nurgle's greatest weapon was not built by Nurgle, but by the Imperium itself. 1 trillion souls in hive cities with 17-hour labor shifts and minimum caloric rations. worlds stripped by imperial tithes collected at gunpoint, billions who pray to a golden throne and receive silence, generation after generation, dying of preventable diseases in the dark. This situation is called faith by the Ministorum and is called order by the Administratum. Nurgle calls it incoming. He doesn't need to take worlds by force. The only thing he needs to is arrive after the Imperium has finished with them. Every agri-world that fails its quota and starves, a regiment abandoned mid-campaign without resupply, or a hive district that floods in chemical runoff while the upper spire calls itself civilization. Each one is a door already open. He just needs to step through. But there is something that Nurgle is hiding in his realm. A goddess. Isha, the Eldar goddess of healing, is a prisoner in Nurgle's realm. She is held in his garden longer than most human civilizations have existed, living inside a place designed to rot everything it touches. Nurgle took her as a trophy, they said, a prize, proof that decay claims even gods of life too, but we think there is something more. Nurgle infects her with plagues and she suffers but finds a cure of it. She is a goddess of healing nonetheless, and she whispers the cure to the remaining followers. Every cure and healing practices that the Eldari possess, it comes from Isha, from inside the garden. Nurgle allows this cycle to run eternally. He makes a plague, infects Isha, who then heals herself, again and again for ages uncounted. He does not stop the cures from reaching her people, because he is not just a god of decay, he is a god of cycles too. The cycle between diseases, plagues, and rot, yes, but also of the growth that follows, the endings that refuse to stay ended. And Isha, whether by design or circumstance, is part of that cycle now. What Nurgle feels towards Isha, if something like that can even be understood, is not cruelty in the way the other gods express it. It is something slower and closer, more persistent. And Isha endures with it because within the garden, she is still alive, still healing and connected to her people, although distantly. That is what Nurgle offers everyone. Not a paradise or powerful plagues, nor even salvation from a certain death. His offer is just better than nothing. And in the grim darkness of the far future, for most people, in the majority of worlds, that is enough. So we have two versions of Grandpa Nurgle. The first one is the Lord of Decay, the monster god of plague and rot, who corrupts the weak and shatters the faithful, a force of entropy to be burned back by the righteous. The second one is a god who understood something Khorne, Tzeentch, and Slaanesh never did. That the most powerful thing you can offer someone who has suffered long enough is not strength, knowledge, or pleasure, is relief. He wins because the Imperium guarantees the conditions for his victory, because Mortarion called out to the Emperor, and Nurgle was the one who answered. Because even gods can be caught in his cycle. Because somewhere, right now, on a world you have never heard of, in a district the Administratum has not visited in 3 generations, a person in enough pain is opening a door, and he is always on the other side, without demands or threats. He is just stirring the same cycle that never ends. The Illuminati Broadcast Network does not tell you what to believe. We only make sure you have seen what is actually there, so make a choice. Which version of Nurgle do you believe? Because the Imperium is counting on you choosing the first one. Nurgle's report is closed. Hope you like it, and thanks for watching.